So, hello everyone to our webinar today, and I'm going to present my screen. So, we have a lot of attendees today, and I hope you can all see my screen well. And so, today our webinar is about using advanced filters in Konstru. And so for those of you who are listening to our webinar the first time and never used Konstru before, I want to give you a bit of an introduction. So Jonathan and we actually before worked at Thornton Tomasetti for quite some time. And at Thornton Tomasetti Engineering, we had some challenging projects like this one from BIG. And this is a high-rise or residential building. And it, of course, because it's very challenging in its shape, it went through a lot of design changes also because the architect was deciding on a different shape all the time. And here you see an overview about the stages that we went through and also the height of the building that kept changing all the time. So what eventually happened was that at TT, we always had to recreate new Etabs models to analyze this building. And this is now, has been many years ago. And so what we did back then was basically creating Grasshopper scripts, and having the model in Grasshopper would allow us to easily adjust the height of the building, as you can see here. And from this information, we would actually generate, back then it was like text files for Etabs. So you could actually import those text files into Etabs. And therefore, the architect could change the geometry as they would like. And we would easily be able to adapt our geometry on our end in the Etabs file, run analysis, and then hand over back the results to the architect. So this way we actually saved a lot of time, and that's what we were talking about today with Konstru as well, because Konstru is actually, we built Konstru because of this. We wanted to make Konstru to make it easy for you to get data from A to B and save a lot of time with that. This basically represents, this image that you see right now represents most of the applications still. And you, of course, could use IFC to translate from Revit to Etabs, for example, but you also know that there are always challenges and there are problems. Like today, we're going to see that, because if you translate an IFC file, you will get your file one-to-one from one application into the other. But with Konstru, you can actually update elements and even filter certain properties, which will be very exciting. So this is why we built Konstru, and Konstru is a solution to make all the applications talk to each other. So what is Konstru at the moment? So we have 8 different plugins at the moment. So we have SAP, Revit, RAM, Grasshopper, Tekla, Dynamo, Etabs, and Excel. And you can use all of those clients and send data across. So this means that you can model something in Revit and change section sizes in Excel or in Etabs, for example, and then send everything over to RAM, run the analysis, and bring back your results to Revit. And this is the power of Konstru. So Konstru is a web-based application. So everything is on our server on app.konstru.com. And we have basically a centralized data repository. So this means that we store everything in a database, and this database grows over time as you are just uploading something and then uploading from other applications as well. And what we do is we store changes. We don't store the entire models over and over again. What we do is if you add a new beam, we save +1 for this new beam. So this way our models are very lightweight, but at the same time, you actually get a history of your model and you can go back in time. And we allow you to actually update very specific things only. That's what we're going to see today. So basically, Jonathan is giving you a demo where he will show you how to just, for example, filter out entire parts of a building when uploading something, or just ignoring element types, or bringing in attributes or filtering out attributes. And we developed something that gives you full transparency every time you up or download a Konstru model. So this is what we call a review dialog, and we're going to talk about this a lot today, because in our review dialog, you will actually see what's going to happen to your model before any changes are applied. And this is very important that you pay a lot of attention to that. So this is just what I said, this is the review dialog basically that we're going to look at today. And this shows you all the changes every time you up or download something. This is very powerful and gives you a lot of security about, what is going to change, and is there something I might want to filter out? let's say I want to filter out columns because I don't want to have them in my model, then I can do it in this dialog. You will learn this today. This means you can filter entire element types. You can filter properties like sections, so you can update a beam by geometry, but ignore the section, for example. Or you can even filter attributes, also what we're going to see today, like you don't want to update forces of an element, so you can actually just filter it out. And before we start the demo, I want to remind you guys that in your GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side, or wherever it pops up, but you should see a questions tab. Please enter your questions there, and you can start right now already. So you can just, if anything comes up into your mind or you want to ask, just type in your question into the question field so we can answer them by the end of the session. So, and this is it. Now it's demo time, and I'm going to hand over to Jonathan. So.
All right. Can you see my screen already?
Yes.
Which one do you see? Do you see my Revit or
I
Etabs?
see Revit.
Revit. Okay, good. Okay, so so I'm in Revit, and I started. So I have this, this like 6-7 story structure here, and I also started just now working on another structure that's not yet finished. And so at this point, I want to share only the complete part of the building with, I want to send that part into Etabs, and I don't want to send the unfinished part into Etabs. So what I did here was to create a selection set in Revit, and I called it elevation tower, and I added all these things into the elevation tower selection set. Okay, so now if I start Konstru, well, the very first thing that I need to do in order to actually upload something to Konstru, let me just go to my web application and create a new Konstru model here. I'm going to call this webinar for today. Create a model. And so now I have this empty model container, and now I can go back into Revit, and I can launch my Konstru application from here, from the toolbar. And it's telling me to select the model, and you can see the topmost model is the one that I just created, called webinar. So I'm going to select this, and I'm going to actually, I just realized that I was doing something, and it's already going to ignore the group, but I'll show you. So I'll show you what happens anyway. So I'm going to press the Update Konstru button. I'm going to give this a name. This, essentially creating a new version of the model right now. By default, it's called First Upload. I'm happy with that. So I press Upload here, and now what it's doing is it's looking at my Revit model. It's looking at anything that may already be on the server, and it's now telling me that 308 elements are going to be added. And okay, so what I forgot that a minute ago, I already prepared the correct filter here. So so let me just rerun this. By default, this would always be run with the recommended upload filter, which is the one that we provide for all of the applications. Konstru essentially creates one default filter, and you will see now that we'll have quite a few more elements in there. And then I will show you how we can create a new filter to ignore some things. So right now we have 358 elements in here. And for example, we have in there load patterns, which I would like to ignore. And I also remembered that I would like to ignore everything that's in this group called elevation tower. So so at this point, let's assume I don't have this filter here. I apologize for the demo. I'm going to click this button here to go to my filter settings. And I'm just going to delete the one filter that I already have, and then create a new one. Okay, so essentially, so we want to now create a new filter that that ignores a certain group from an upload from Revit to Konstru. So I'm going to create a new filter, and I'm going to go from Revit to Konstru, and I'm going to say ignore group demo, because I want to show you how this works. So there's a group called elevation tower that I want to ignore. And I'm also going to just check this box here, make this my default filter, so that the next time around, this is going to be applied by default. So okay, press create. So here's my new filter, and now I have to go in and just make some changes. And under group, I'm going to say the name of the group that I want to ignore is elevation tower. So basically this is, we call them groups. In Revit, they're called selection sets. So this is the name of, so any element that's contained within a selection set called elevation tower will not be uploaded the next time I use this filter. And then I had also noticed that load patterns were being uploaded, and I don't want that. So I'm just gonna click on the load pattern portion here and say ignore this element type. So whenever you see ignored next to it, this just means it will not be uploaded by this filter. Okay, press save. So now my filter has been saved. So now I can select the other filter. And now it's going to recalculate everything. And if you remember, there were about 368, I think, elements before I filtered it out. So now it's going to be reduced. So this is one way that you can use Konstru to ignore which elements, even if they're not just of one type, even if they have multiple types, like in my case, there were floors and braces and columns and beams all within a group. This is one way of ignoring those. I'm not sure if this worked, but I'm just going to press OK. I have a feeling I named it wrong, but anyway, so ignore group demo, finish the update. So already, and now I can view the model. I think I typed in the group name incorrectly. Let's just look at that. Yes, I typed it in incorrectly. Well, too bad. So now, anyway, now we have it all in there. So I'm not sure. I think I misspelled it somehow. But anyway, so now we have it all in there. So now I'm going to download this into Etabs. So I'm going to head over to Etabs, start a new model here, and launch Konstru. And now this is, again, communicating with the server and looking at my latest list of models. There we go, the webinar model. And I'm going to select this, and I'm just going to use the recommended filter to download to Etabs. If you want, as you can see here, as I mouse over, you can also change your filter settings right here, but I'm okay with this as it is. So I'm going to download this into Etabs. And now it's going to show me all the elements that are being added. So for example, 6 new levels and floors, et cetera. Load patterns are not being added. And this is because they're just being filtered. My default filter settings for Revit, for Etabs import, ignore these. Okay, so I press finish download. The next thing that we are presented with is a material mapper and area and profile section mapping dialog. And there's one material called unknown, and a lot of the walls and actually I can show you in the application, which elements are affected by that material. So there's a material called unknown, and anything that you see in blue right now is affected by that material. So pretty much all of our concrete is assigned to some funny material that is called unknown. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to map it in Etabs. Let me go back to the mapper here. I'm going in Etabs now. I'm going to map this material to a concrete material that we have already loaded in Etabs. And then for everything else, I'm going to create new materials. Okay. So we just changed the materials for quite a few settings, for quite a few elements. Okay. And so here's our model. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to run an analysis. So I'm just going to set up before I do that, I want to modify a beam and a column just to have a few changes in the model. So I'm going to select one column in the bottom corner. I'm going to make this something beefy so we can see it easily. And I'm going to select one of the beams as well and also make this something bigger, W14. Okay, so we've modified only 2 profiles. We've modified quite a few materials, and we're about to add attributes by running an analysis. So I'm going to just select some of my members up here and assign some frame loads. This should be pretty quick. And I'm going to create a load combination. just called combination 1, that's fine. Okay, and I'm going to run the analysis. So of course, this is not going to be super accurate, but just for the demonstration today, essentially what we're doing right now is we are running an analysis, and what this is going to do is it is going to create all these new attribute values that are being assigned to all the structure, to all the columns and beams and braces and so on. Okay, so we can see the progress down here. It's halfway done already. Okay, so now we're done running our analysis. And once it's done saving it, we can now open Konstru again, and we can push the updates back into the webinar model. Before I do that, though, I want to just double check that I didn't already go ahead and create the filters. So let me just check my Etabs filters. Yes, so I'm going to delete this because that's what I wanted to show for the demo. Okay, so I'm going to select the webinar model, and now I want to update Konstru, and it shows that it's using the recommended upload filter from Etabs. So I'm just going to select this. So remember, we only modified 2 sections, and then we created analysis results. So so this might look wild, and this is, I think, the truth about working in multiple platforms is they're just 94 elements are being added, 300 elements are being modified, and 1 element is being deleted. So this looks a bit scary right now. So the first thing I want to figure out is why is something being deleted. So I'm going to look at it by status, and I look at what is being deleted, and I see the level 1 that I had defined in my Revit model is being deleted. This is because if I look at all my new elements, I can also see that there are 2 levels being added. So essentially, with Etabs, there is a shortcoming that every time you import a model into Etabs, the Etabs model cannot have 0 levels when you start. And therefore, if you bring in a level into the location where another level already exists, Etabs is going to delete the incoming level because it cannot delete the existing level. So knowing that, I'm going to say now, okay, when I next export from Etabs, I want to ignore levels. So that's the first filter I want to set. Then there are all these nodes and restraints that I don't really want to upload. Etabs just had to create those for the analysis purposes, but they should just remain there. So I'm going to select create a filter to ignore nodes and restraints as well. And finally, if I look at all the updates, I can see, okay, a lot of walls and floors have material changes. If you remember, there was a material called unknown, and I assigned it to a new concrete material. I think that's fine. We can push those up. And then we can see columns and beams have also been changed. And I'm actually going to, so for some of them, it's telling me there has been profile changes. So for 1 beam and 1 column. And this is what I actually expected. It used to be a W18, now it's a W27. But then it's also showing me that it's adding all these attributes called forces, where before there was nothing, and now there's an array of values. Okay, so that's why we have so many changes. Every element now has an attribute called forces. Okay, so I'm going to now go into my filter settings. I'm going to ignore nodes, restraints, and levels. So I'm going to create a new filter from Etabs. No levels, nodes, restraints. And I'm going to push everything else up. Okay, so create this filter, edit it, find the levels here, just click on ignore. The same for node and restraint. Just ignore all that. So this is now my filter. So then I have to refresh my filters list, and I'm going to now select this filter. So at this point, it's going to, again, compare the model against my filters. And now you can see there's nothing deleted anymore. The list of new elements has been greatly reduced because we don't have nodes and restraints in here anymore. So this looks much better. And so I'm going to finish the update. We're still updating the material properties, but that's fine. That's, that's something that I purposely do. Okay. Now if we look at the model, and if we, by default, it's going to present us with a change view, and it highlights a lot of things. So now let's just say there's a different person. I'm not the person working in Revit. So let's just say somebody, my Revit collaborator because it's easy to share this model with others here. So let's just say the person that wants to download this into their existing Revit model might just look at this change view and get scared because they realize, oh wow, everything seems to have updated. In fact, there are only very few, grids and levels that haven't been changed. So things have been added, things have been updated. So one thing is I would just quickly review this model now, and I would select some of the elements, and I would see that, okay, there has been an attribute change for this particular column. Before there was no force attribute, and now there's a force attribute. So there's an attribute.forces, which has been added by my recent update from Etabs. So now I know, okay, there seem to be some attribute changes. So one thing I can do is I can change the way that I review this model, and I can go to comparison settings, and I can say, yes, show me all the changes, but do not show me attribute changes. So I unselect that, and now already, there are only 46 model changes now. So
Jonathan, is there also a way to just show what has been added? But in our case, we probably have elements only that are.
Yes, exactly. So if you want to see what has been added, which I'm not sure anything is going to show, because I think, so let's just hide unchanged. So basically all the elements that have been added were groups and low patterns and things like that. So they don't have a graphical visualization. But yes, you can absolutely ignore updated elements if you wanted to from here. So the other thing is, if I notice for my floor, for example, if I select this, it's telling me that it used to be a material called unknown, and now it's a material called concrete. So again, if I wanted to, I could just say, well, show me all the element changes, but do not show me material changes. So if you deselect that, now we're getting closer to, now we only have 2 change elements. So, and if I select this, it's telling me now, okay, the profile has changed. Okay, so now, I spent a couple of minutes to just sort of review how this model has been updated since I last touched it. So, because what it's doing is it's essentially comparing the current version, which is coming from Etabs, to the version that came from Revit. So, this was my Revit model, and it's now comparing it to the Etabs model. Okay, so knowing all of this, knowing that there were a ton of material changes, and that there were a ton of attribute changes, and that a beam profile and a column profile has been changed, I can now make selective decisions. I could, for example, say, well, the next time I download this into Revit, I do not want to bring in any attributes of type force. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go to my account settings, and I'm going to go to my filter settings here. Let me just, yes. So I'm going to delete again. I had already prepared all this. That's why. So I'm just going to delete what I had. So I'm going to create a new filter, and I'm going to say, I want to go from Konstru to Revit. And I'm going to ignore forces and materials, for example. Okay, so basically you have very high level of control. Ignore. So you have a very high level of control over what you want to import and what you don't want to import. Okay, so I'm going to edit this now. Actually, I'm going to make this my default filter. And now I'm going to say, well, for any floor, I don't want materials. And for any wall, I don't want materials. And also for columns, braces, and beams, I do not want to update attributes. Actually, let me just make this a bit quicker. I'm going to bring in attributes for braces, but not for beams and columns. So there's an attribute called forces. And I'm going to say this is the attribute that I want to exclude for the elements of type beam. And then I'm also going to edit columns here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I want to ignore attributes of type forces. All right, so save this filter, go back to Revit, launch Konstru, and select my model. this takes a while sometimes, and we find that usually during the webinar when we're streaming, it takes a lot longer to load. Okay, so here's my model. I'm going to select it, and you can see because I set my filter to be, I set my new filter as a default filter, it's already being selected here. Ignore forces and materials. So all I have to do is just download to Revit, and we should not see any forces for columns and beams. We should still see them for braces. And we should see our two updates, our profile updates for columns and beams. So, we control very much what exactly is being imported now. So I think this is an important workflow, is to sort of go into the 3D viewer, review what happened. So now we see 49 elements are being modified, 4 elements are being added. Okay, let's see what's being added. Yes, load patterns and load combos, sure, because I didn't filter them. And then updates, there's a column profile change, which was expected. And actually Revit tries to show me that. So if I move this a little, I can see that this column is about to change. The same for this beam here, it's about to change, so that's fine. And then for all these braces, as expected, we now have a new attribute. Oh, it doesn't show me that properly, but basically we have a new attribute called forces coming in now. So yeah, so if I finish the download, then that's basically what's going to change. So you're going to see now in a second these two elements update in size. And I think with this we can finish the demo. We only have a couple of minutes left to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. This was great. So I want to remind you, everyone, if you have any questions, type them into the questions field in your GoToWebinar panel, and we can answer them immediately. And we already have a first question coming in. Is there also another way to filter elements on upload?
Yeah.
So,
do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think we saw today that because I misspelled something, it was not, because I misspelled the selection set name, it did not actually ignore the selection set on upload. So another way is that you can also, upon upload, instead of uploading the entire model, you can upload only one selection set that's in the model. So essentially, you can either upload all but one selection sets, or you can upload only one selection set. Those are the two options that we have.
Great. And there's another question coming in. Are there any recommended default settings for filters? You want to answer that? Or?
Sure, yeah, I can show that. Okay, so these are all the custom filters that I'm seeing right now. These are all the filters that I made. Most of them I made today while doing this demo. So there's also a button there, show Konstru filters. And all the ones that essentially have all the ones that you see here that have a view icon instead of an edit icon, those are the Konstru recommended filters. And these are if you have never created any filter yourself, or if you've never set a filter to be default, these are the ones that are always being used by default. So if I look at one of these, I can see that, for example, cables are being ignored when I upload from Etabs, openings are being ignored, components and foundations are being ignored. So there are some default settings here, and some of it is even grayed out. So for example, Etabs does not support cable types. Therefore, I don't even have the option to turn this on. So also I should say, if I want to modify this, I actually have to clone this filter. I cannot modify the default filter. So I would just make a clone of it, and then I would give it some description and name, and then I could go in and I could modify it.
Yeah, this is very, very important. So because this is it's basically done by our defaults that we experienced throughout the use of Konstru. Over the years that people have been using our applications, we learned that certain settings have to be filtered usually. It's like a standard thing. Like, let's say you don't want to bring in rotations from Revit into Etabs because usually it's messing up your Etabs model. But I would always recommend you, if you are seeing any unexpected changes, go to the filters and check the defaults just to have a look, not that anything in there is filtered out that you actually wanted to have in your model. But this being said, this is only applied for updates. So on a new element, you will always get all the properties. This is only for updates.
Yeah. So I think the big lesson is don't be afraid of the review dialog. A lot will change, especially if you do things like what I did. Upon import, I mapped an unknown material into a known material. So subsequently, all these elements were changed, which might look scary because I didn't actually think about making a change in the model. It just so happened because I assigned a new material that 30 elements were being changed. So if you look at the review dialog, really take it, really look at it in detail and really try to understand why something changed. Oh yeah, of course, I remember now that I applied a mapping and that's why all these slabs changed. And then just set your filter settings up so that the next time you export or import something, you can target exactly what you want to export or import.
There's another question coming asking what the symbols mean in the review dialog.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
So if you hover those symbols, you should see that there's a filter icon, or Jonathan is going to bring up a new dialog, I guess, and there's a filter icon. Yeah, these exactly. And then there's if you hover them, you get a short explanation, like openings are not supported by this plugin, which actually means then this plugin doesn't support it, so therefore it won't be downloaded in this case, of course. And if you hover the other one, the filter that is on walls, for example, it shows filter allows material and profile. So it means that all the other properties are filtered out. And also up there at the top at level, there's no icon at all, which means it's just coming in. But actually, that could be a nice tooltip there. Yeah. But it just means that everything will come through. So this way, you always get a quick idea about, did someone filter it out entirely, like the entire element, or did someone apply a filter, or is it just not supported at all?
Yeah.
So yes, sadly we're coming to an end to our webinar because it's already a bit over time. Thank you everybody for your questions. We will answer them also online and post them online, so you will find your questions there. Also the questions we didn't make anymore, we will answer them as well, so you can find them online and you can read them next week or so when we have our blog post ready.
And if you have any question in general, you can always go to the web application or to our website, and there's a documentation tab, and you see all these links here, YouTube channel and so on. So for example, if I click on supported elements, you can see an overview of all the element types that are being supported by all the different applications. So so there's a lot of in here in Zendesk. There's a lot of documentation, and then of course otherwise you can also just chat with us and ask us questions here.
Great. Then, thank you everyone for attending our webinar, and we keep you posted about the next topics that are coming up. We haven't made up our mind because usually we do a query and ask you guys what you want to see. We will present you an offer pretty soon, and then you will see. Yeah, just keep posted, and you will see our next webinars. Thank you, everybody.
All
Goodbye.
right. Bye-bye.